There comes a moment in a man's life when silence grows heavier than words, when unspoken thoughts press against his chest like invisible stones. Daniel was one of those men who had learned the art of existing without truly living. Each morning followed the same ritual. He brewed his coffee, stood by the window, and watched life pass by like a distant train he no longer wished to catch. He went to work, spoke when required, smiled when expected, yet inside, something was missing. Something that once made his heart feel real. He wasn't sad in the way most people are. He was simply empty, like a home that had forgotten what laughter sounded like. There was a time when life still shimmered with meaning, when the rain or the morning breeze could awaken something tender within him. But time, with its quiet erosion, had dulled those colors until the world appeared as a faded photograph. Each night he closed his eyes, not to dream, but to remember faces, places, and echoes of moments long gone. He would wake before dawn, unsure whether it was loneliness or fear that stirred him. His reflection no longer surprised him. It only reminded him of all that had settled into silence. The eyes that once searched now merely accepted. He used to think healing meant forgetting, yet the more he tried to let go, the deeper his memories rooted themselves within him, flowing quietly beneath the calm mask he wore each day. His life ran on routine, but within that stillness, something began to stir. A soft awareness that he had drifted too far from his own soul. He remembered the boy he once was, wild, curious, unafraid to dream. Somewhere deep down he wondered if that boy still lived behind the scars. One evening, as the sun drowned in the horizon, Daniel wandered through the narrow streets of his town. The air smelled of damp earth, the kind that carries the scent of both endings and beginnings. His footsteps echoed faintly, as if the world itself was reminding him that he was still here. When he reached the old bridge by the river, he stopped. He had stood there countless times before, but tonight felt different. The water glimmered beneath the fading light, its murmur like a whisper that called him home. For the first time in years he truly listened, not to the noise of life but to the quiet inside him. He realized that he had been waiting for someone to rescue him from his emptiness, but no one ever came. And perhaps no one was meant to. Healing, he understood, was never something given. It was something earned, piece by piece, through the fragments of all that once broke you. That night, he stood by the water for hours, letting the cold air sting his face. He thought of every time he had cursed himself for not being stronger, for not being enough, for not moving forward fast enough. But what if survival itself was strength? What if endurance, silent and unseen, was the truest form of courage? A tear slipped down his cheek, and this time he did not wipe it away. It didn't carry sadness. It carried surrender. He understood now that he didn't need to erase his pain. He only needed to stop running from it. Each loss, each failure, each moment of quiet despair became a mark of proof that he had lived. His heart, for the first time in years, felt light. Not because it was healed, but because it had finally stopped resisting. As he walked back home, the streets looked unchanged, yet the world seemed newly alive. He noticed the sound of his own footsteps, the hum of distant life, the whisper of wind against his skin, things that had always been there, waiting for him to listen. And in that stillness, Daniel took a slow breath and felt something unfamiliar, yet deeply human. The steady, unshaken heartbeat of a man who had finally begun to heal. The days that followed moved in quiet rhythm, each carrying a strange and gentle depth, as if the world had been repainted in softer shades. Daniel began waking before dawn, not because he needed to, but because the stillness of those early hours had started to feel sacred. The first light that crept through his curtains no longer burned his tired eyes. It touched him softly, as though reminding him that he was still allowed to begin again. He brewed tea, sat by the window, and watched the world unfold. Nothing around him had changed, yet his way of seeing had. For years he had chased meaning as if it were something hidden outside him, but now he understood that meaning was never found. It was felt, tucked quietly inside the moments that seemed ordinary. He walked often, not to flee from his thoughts but to meet them. Every step became a small conversation with himself, and for the first time he did not rush to end it. The voice within him, once drowned by guilt and regret, began to speak again. It asked for nothing grand, only peace. As days turned into weeks, Daniel began to clean his apartment. It wasn't just an act of order. It was a slow unburdening of his spirit. He placed old photographs, broken watches, and half-written letters into boxes, not to forget, but to remember without pain. Each object carried a memory, and for the first time, he thanked them all before letting them go. In that gratitude, grief quietly loosened its grip. When he cooked, he felt the warmth of the stove. When he gazed at the sky, he no longer saw emptiness, he saw vastness. He noticed the delicate miracles hidden within the fabric of ordinary days. A stranger, a small kindness, a child's laughter echoing through the street, the scent of rain rising from the ground. Each whispered softly that healing is not an event. It is the slow and patient return of wonder. Some nights the shadows still came back, pressing against the walls of his peace. But this time, he didn't resist them. He welcomed them like old companions who had once hurt him but had also taught him what strength truly meant. Pain, he realized, never disappears. It transforms. It becomes the soil from which new life grows. One cold evening, Daniel found himself once more at the bridge by the river, the place where his healing had first begun. The air held its familiar chill, the water its quiet hum. But tonight the scene seemed gentler. He stood there, his reflection trembling in the dark water below. It was the same face he had seen countless times, yet something new glowed in his eyes. Stillness. He realized that the man staring back at him was no longer broken. He was whole, not because life had spared him, but because he had learned to accept it without demanding it to be fair. Every scar on his heart had turned into a mark of survival, proof that he had walked through his own darkness and returned. A faint smile touched his lips, not for anyone to see but for himself, and in silence he offered gratitude to the night. The wind rose, whispering through the trees, and Daniel closed his eyes. In the darkness, he felt something unfamiliar, not loneliness, but peace. A peace that didn't come from forgetting, but from finally understanding that nothing we love is ever truly lost. Everything we lose becomes part of who we are, shaping our strength, softening our edges, teaching us how to be gentle. When he opened his eyes again, the last hues of sunset had dissolved into the night, and he knew then that the heart never forgets to beat. It merely waits for us to return to it. As he turned to leave, a light rain began to fall. The droplets touched his skin like small blessings, cool, pure, alive. He didn't rush for shelter. He stood still, letting it wash over him. The rain mingled with the warmth of his tears, and for once, he didn't hide them. They were not tears of sorrow. They were proof that he had begun to feel again. Somewhere deep inside, a voice as old as his soul whispered that this was what freedom truly meant. Not escape from the world, but release from the weight of his own heart. That night, lying in bed, the silence felt transformed. It was no longer hollow. It was filled with calm. The memories that once haunted him now arrived gently, like familiar songs that carried both ache and beauty. He saw that the soul doesn't heal in straight lines. It spirals, returning to its wounds with wiser eyes until pain becomes wisdom. And within that wisdom, peace is born. Before he drifted into sleep, he offered a quiet prayer, not for more years, not for more joy, but for the grace to live each moment with awareness. When morning came, the world was bathed in golden light. Daniel opened his eyes, breathed deeply, and smiled. There was no grand revelation, no sudden miracle, just stillness, just life, as it was meant to be. He now knew that healing wasn't about becoming someone new. It was about remembering who he had always been beneath all the noise. Stepping outside, the morning sun touched his face with warmth, and he felt something unspoken but certain. Peace isn't the absence of chaos. It's the acceptance of it. He placed a hand over his heart and felt its rhythm. Calm, alive, grateful. After all this time, his heart had never forgotten how to beat. It had only been waiting for him to come home.